My brother didn't come home for Thanksgiving the year I turned 16. Nobody explained why. My mother just set one less plate and told me to stop asking questions. That was the first thing I learned about my family. Some absences are never explained. They're just quietly absorbed, like water into dry ground, until you forget there was ever a gap. My name is Laurel. I'm 31 years old. I own a small event planning business. I have a rescue dog named Fig. And until 8 months ago, I co-owned a 3-bedroom house with my mother in Clarksville, Tennessee. I say co-owned. What I mean is, I paid for it. Not all at once. Not in some grand gesture. It happened the way most financial catastrophes happen. Slowly, and then all at once, with my name on enough paperwork that when everything finally cracked open, I was the one left holding the pieces. Let me back up. My mother is a woman who has always needed saving, not in a dramatic way, not addiction, not illness, not crisis, just a steady low-grade inability to manage money, to hold a job longer than 14 months, to make decisions that didn't eventually require someone else to clean up after her. When I was growing up, that someone was my grandmother. When my grandmother died and left a modest inheritance, my mother burned through it in 18 months. After that, the someone was me. I graduated college at 22, moved back to Clarksville because my mother called me crying and said she was going to lose her apartment. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months, maybe a year, get her stable, and then I'd move to Nashville like I'd planned, start my business properly, build something. That was 9 years ago. My younger brother Kyle never moved back. Kyle lives in Phoenix. Kyle calls on birthdays and Christmas, sends gift cards, and has somehow maintained the image of the devoted son without ever once writing a check. I used to resent him for it. Now I just think he was smarter than me and had the sense to put distance between himself and the undertow before it could pull him down. The house was my idea. I'll own that. Renting felt like throwing money away, and my mother had decent credit back then. Better than mine, actually, because she'd never taken on enough debt to damage it. We went in together. My down payment, her name on the mortgage alongside mine. A clean split of expenses that lasted approximately 4 months before it became 70-30, then 90-10, then me paying everything while she contributed what she could, which was sometimes $200 and sometimes a casserole dish. I didn't fight it. That's the part I have to sit with. I didn't fight it because fighting felt like abandoning her. And I had been taught from the time I was small that abandoning my mother was the worst thing I could do. She had nobody else. She had given up so much for us. On and on the same loop, and I had heard it so many times it had become the background noise of my own thoughts. My business grew. I hired 2 part-time assistants. I started doing corporate events, not just weddings, and the contracts got larger. I bought a better car. I started a retirement account. I was, by any objective measure, doing fine, and still, somehow, never quite fine enough to stop propping up everything around me. The breaking point didn't look like a breaking point at first. My mother called me in February of last year. She sounded strange, bright, almost giddy, the way she gets when she's convinced herself that a new idea is going to solve everything. She told me my cousin Daphne had reached out. Daphne, who I had not spoken to since my aunt's funeral 6 years ago, who lived in Baton Rouge and ran some kind of online resale business. My mother was very excited about Daphne. She wanted Daphne to come stay with us for a while, just a few weeks, while Daphne sorted out a situation with the landlord. She said it like that. A situation. I said no. I said it calmly and clearly. I said I worked from home 2 days a week. I had client calls and deadlines, and I was not in a position to have a house guest indefinitely. I said I wished Daphne well, and she was welcome to stay in a hotel, but not with us. My mother said I was being selfish. I went to bed that night thinking it was settled. I came home from a site visit 3 days later, and Daphne was sitting at my kitchen table eating cereal. She had a rolling suitcase, a duffel bag, and a large tote full of things she was planning to resell. She had set up her inventory on my dining room table. She smiled at me like we were old friends, and said it was so good to see me. She'd heard so much about my business, she hoped we'd get to really reconnect. My mother was standing in the doorway to the living room, with the specific expression she wears when she is braced for my reaction, shoulders slightly forward, chin slightly down, already composing her defense. I thought about what you said, my mother told me, but she needed somewhere to go. I stood in my kitchen and looked at my cousin's cereal bowl on my table and my cousin's inventory on my dining room sideboard, a sideboard I had bought at an estate sale and refinished myself, spending 2 weekends sanding it down and staining it the exact color I wanted. And I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something more like recognition. I had been here before. Not this specific moment, but this shape of moment. The decision already made, the fait accompli. My feelings irrelevant, not because they were dismissed, but because they were simply never consulted in the first place. I told Daphne it was nice to see her. I told my mother we would talk later. I took my laptop to my bedroom and I closed the door, and I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for a while. Then I called my attorney. His name is Frank, and I have worked with him on business contracts for 3 years. He is not a dramatic man. He does not overreact. When I explained the situation, the house, the co-ownership, the 9 years of financial imbalance, my mother's pattern of making unilateral decisions about shared space, he listened without interrupting. Then he asked me a few questions. Then he was quiet for a moment. "You've been thinking about this for a while," he said. It wasn't a question. "I've been not thinking about it for a while," I said. Which is different. He walked me through my options. There were more of them than I expected. I want to be honest about something. I did not make any decisions that day. I did not do anything drastic. I went back out to the kitchen and I made dinner, and I ate it at the table with my mother and my cousin, and I listened to Daphne talk about her resale business. And I asked polite questions and I did not say a single word about any of it. But I had started to understand, somewhere in the back of my mind, that the situation had a shape, and that the shape could be changed. Daphne stayed for 11 weeks. I know because I counted, not obsessively, not with a calendar marked in red, just in the way you count the days of an illness, noting its progress with a kind of detached clinical interest. During those 11 weeks, she used my printer, my parking spot, my good towels, and roughly 40% of the hot water. She left her inventory on my dining room table for 6 of those weeks until I moved it myself to the garage, at which point she accused me of sabotaging her business. She had 3 separate arguments with buyers that I heard from my home office. She borrowed my car once without asking and returned it with the seat adjusted and a receipt from Taco Bell in the cup holder. My mother, during all of this, maintained the position that I was being unwelcoming. I kept working. I kept paying the mortgage. I kept having the phone calls with Frank, quiet and methodical, building out a picture of what I actually wanted and what was actually possible. What was possible, it turned out, was quite a lot. The house had appreciated significantly since we bought it. The market, in our area, had been brutal for buyers and generous for sellers. If we were to sell, after paying off the remaining mortgage, the proceeds would be substantial. My name was on the deed. My down payment was documented. My contributions to the mortgage were documented. I had, without entirely meaning to, been meticulous about this, always paying by check or bank transfer, always with a clear memo line. Frank was very pleased about the memo lines. There was also the matter of an agreement my mother and I had signed when we first bought the house. Not a formal legal document, just a shared Google Doc we'd both signed digitally, outlining our agreed split of expenses. She had stopped meeting her side of that agreement within the first year. I had documentation of that too. I am not by nature a person who keeps receipts. But I am a person who runs a business, and running a business means I have systems, and my systems, it turned out, had been quietly building a record of everything for 9 years. I did not tell my mother any of this. The thing about people who expect you to absorb their decisions is that they stop anticipating that you might make your own. Daphne left on a Tuesday in May. She found a sublease somewhere. I didn't ask for details. She hugged me on her way out and said we should really keep in touch, and I said of course. And then I watched her rolling suitcase disappear down the front walk, and I felt the particular relief of a noise finally stopping. That evening, my mother seemed lighter too. She made pasta, which is her comfort food, and she poured herself a glass of wine, and she said, almost cheerfully, "I'm glad that worked out." I looked at her across the table. "I have something I need to talk to you about," I said. She looked up. "I've been thinking about the house," I said. She looked up. "I've been thinking about the house," I said. "I'd like to sell it." The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. I could feel her processing it. The words themselves first, then the implications, then the shape of the threat. Sell it, she repeated. The market is good right now. We'd both come out ahead. This is my home. It's both of ours. That's actually the issue. I had rehearsed this conversation many times, in my car and in the shower, and lying awake at 3 a.m, I had thought through every direction it could go. I was calm, not performed calm, not the frozen stillness of someone suppressing panic, but actual calm, the kind that comes from having already made a decision and simply waiting for the moment to say it out loud. My mother cried. She said I was abandoning her. She said she had given up everything for me, for Kyle, for this family, and this was how I repaid her. She said I had always been cold. She said Daphne's visit hadn't even been that bad, and I was using it as an excuse. I sat with all of it. I let her say everything she needed to say. Then I said, I've already spoken with an attorney. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you as a courtesy, because I love you and because I'd like us to handle this in a way that's fair to both of us. She left the table. I heard her bedroom door close. I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum. Here is what I had not told her yet. I had already been in contact with a real estate agent. I had already received a preliminary estimate. I had already confirmed, with Frank, that I had the legal standing to force a sale if it came to that, but that I hoped it wouldn't. And here is the thing I had been carrying quietly for 3 months. The thing I had not said out loud to anyone except Frank. My mother had, 6 months prior, quietly refinanced a small personal loan against her equity stake in the house without telling me. It wasn't illegal. She had the right, but it had reduced her net equity, and she had not mentioned it to me, and I had only found out because I had pulled a full title report as part of my consultation with Frank. She had made a financial decision about our shared property and not told me. I had made a note of that too. The following weeks were hard. I won't pretend otherwise. My mother alternated between cold silence and emotional confrontations, and twice she called Kyle, who called me and gently suggested I was being unreasonable. I explained the situation to Kyle in detail. The 9 years, the financial records, the refinancing she hadn't disclosed. He was quiet for a long time after that. I didn't know, he said finally. I know you didn't, I said. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make it a whole thing. But it is a whole thing. He didn't push back after that. The house went on the market in June. It sold in 9 days. We got 2 offers over asking. The final sale price was $43,000 above what our agent had originally projected. It was, by any measure, an extraordinarily good outcome. The kind that required no one to argue about fairness or percentages, because there was simply enough. My mother received her portion. It covered the personal loan she'd taken out, plus a significant remainder. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away that she said was too small and too far from everything, and I helped her move because she is still my mother, and I am not a person who abandons people, regardless of what she has always feared. She did not thank me for the help. She did thank me, 2 weeks later, in a voicemail, for making sure the split was fair. It was a small thing. I replayed it a few times. I found a condo. It has a balcony and a second room I use as an office, and the walls are whatever color I want them to be, and nobody borrows my parking spot. And the only person making decisions about the space is me. Fig has taken to sleeping on the balcony in the evenings. I bring my laptop out there sometimes and work while the sun goes down over the rooftops. And sometimes I don't work at all. I just sit there with my dog and my coffee and the particular silence of a life that is, finally, my own. I talked to my mother last Sunday. She told me about a new yoga class she'd found near her apartment. She sounded okay, maybe better than okay. There was something almost buoyant in her voice, the way she sometimes sounds when she's been relieved of a weight she wasn't admitting she was carrying. I think the house had been a pressure for her too, in ways she never said directly. I think we were both, in some ways, waiting for someone to end it. I'm not angry at her. I want to be clear about that. I spent a long time thinking I would be angry, that when it was over, there would be this enormous reservoir of resentment finally breaking the surface. But what I feel mostly is tired, and then underneath the tired, something that might be peace. I loved her, and I helped her, and I also had to save myself. Those things are not contradictions. They exist at the same time, in the same person, without canceling each other out. My cousin Daphne texted me a few months ago. She said she'd heard about the house. She hoped everything was okay. she'd love to grab coffee sometime if I was ever in Baton Rouge. I haven't replied yet. I'm still thinking about it. Some things I'm still learning to let take as long as they take. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this ended. Not in some abstract philosophical way, just the ordinary kind of thinking you do when you're sitting on a balcony with your dog at dusk, replaying a decade of your life and trying to understand how it went the way it did. Here's what I keep coming back to. Nothing that happened was random. Not the way my mother learned she could make decisions about our shared home without telling me. Not the way Kyle never came back and somehow never had to answer for it. Not the way Daphne walked into my kitchen like she belonged there. Every single one of those things happened because it had worked before. The pattern existed because I had allowed it to exist. Not out of stupidity, not out of weakness, but out of a genuine belief that holding things together was the same as loving people. It took me a long time to understand that those are not the same thing. What I know now is that integrity is not just about how you treat other people. It's about whether you treat yourself with the same basic honesty you'd extend to anyone else. For 9 years, I told myself a story about temporary sacrifice. 6 more months, 1 more push, get her stable, and then I'll live my own life. That story was a lie I told with good intentions, and good intentions don't change what a lie costs you over time. The cost, in my case, was most of my 20s and a significant amount of money. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying it because the accounting matters. You cannot make better decisions if you refuse to look at what the current ones are actually taking from you. The intelligence piece, and I mean emotional intelligence, the kind that has nothing to do with test scores, is learning to read a pattern before it repeats rather than after. I saw what my mother did with Daphne's arrival. I had seen versions of that move my entire life. The fait accompli, the decision already made, wrapped in a story about love and need and family obligation. I had responded to every previous version of that move by absorbing it. The one thing I did differently this time was pause long enough to ask, what happens if I don't absorb this one? What does the shape of this situation look like if I'm actually honest about it? That pause, that small, quiet, almost imperceptible pause, was the beginning of everything changing. And then there's the matter of endurance. Not the loud dramatic kind, not the inspirational poster version where someone grits their teeth through impossible odds. I mean the quiet kind. The kind that looks like paying your bills and documenting your bank transfers and having calm phone calls with your attorney and continuing to show up for a life you are actively, deliberately building rather than simply reacting to. That's what got me through. Not rage, not a single explosive confrontation, not a dramatic ultimatum. Just steadiness. One documented payment at a time. One clear conversation at a time. One honest look at what I actually wanted, and then the methodical work of making it real. My mother is okay. Daphne is somewhere in Baton Rouge. Kyle sends gift cards at Christmas. Fig is asleep on the balcony right now, one ear twitching in his sleep. I helped my mother move into her apartment. I carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs. I assembled her bookshelf because the instructions confused her. I did those things because they were the right things to do, not because I owed them, but because I chose to. There's a difference, and finally knowing the difference is the closest thing to freedom I've ever felt.